McPherson coming to you live back in the 501. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. And we had a big Wednesday, and Thursday is a perfect day to talk about it. We also got some recruiting intel. Interestingly enough, I had a high major assistant coach reach out to me based on the content I was putting out from Arkansas practice yesterday. Just wanted to reach out and thought it was pretty cool that we got to do that. We got to talking to recruiting, and so we got an update from not only that source, but another source on one of Arkansas's priority recruiting targets, national number 3 5-star Jordan Smith Jr., the 6'2" guard out of Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia. And it sounds promising. So we'll just tell you what we were told. We'll get to that. Probably we're going to do that first. Mika Aittonen, the class of 2026, is he going to reclass of 2025? Back and forth over several months, almost a year now. Sort of been kind of like a roller coaster. He won't, he will, he won't. But he's going to drop anyway tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. He put a timer, a countdown on his Instagram account. And if my math's right, it'll be sometime tomorrow morning. But Mika Aittonen, the 6'10", 6'11-ish combo forward, originally from Finland, but going to drop his top 7 schools tomorrow. So we're expecting that. And then yesterday we did 2 segments. We went through early in the morning before I got up to Fayetteville, the first few highlights that came out from practices. It wasn't much, but we talked about some of that. We've obviously given you some intel from folks that have been inside the building for the last few weeks on what they were seeing. And the most recent one I did last week was from a coach who was in there for not 1 but 2 practices. And it was amazing the talking points that we pulled out of that, and we shared with you guys how much of that lined up with what I saw yesterday when we got to Fayetteville, went through, and we're, the window was an hour for the media to watch the team practice. The first 15 minutes of which we were allowed to record videos and publish those things. Kevin, I want Tyron Stokes. Who doesn't? That's the number 1 player in 2026. Big time 5-star. Thanks for the comment. So we got that 1 hour window, 15 minutes to record. So we got a lot of content out relative to that. But the thing was, when we came back on to share, kind of an immediate reaction once the post-practice press conferences were over, it was just kind of rapid fire, hitting on things as they came to my mind, just trying to kind of remember it. Having a chance to get back home late last night, go back and watch all 15 minutes of the practice stuff that we got to record, going back through my recollections of the things that I remembered, impressions I got on the stuff that is not made public, kind of putting that all together, going back through the transcripts, thinking about some things. We're going to recap some of that and recap some of the practice stuff. And I've kind of outlined some things on a list to go down here and talk about, kind of overview of the team, some offense, defense stuff as a team, and then some individual stuff. We'll hit some of that. And again, some of it will be repetitive. We talked about some of it yesterday. Jordan Smith is at the top of my wish list, is what this poster, this comment says. So your wish list, I think on mine too. I'm not going to say it's not. And that's who we're going to talk about. So let's jump into that. 3 minutes and 47 seconds in. Again, it's HogvilleNET YouTube Live. My name's Kevin McPherson. All right. So Jordan Smith Jr., I did my I think it was about 35 minute reaction show. Then I shuffled down the street a little bit, went in, charged up put the old phone on the charger, and was tweeting more content, more video content, and just trying to get everything finished before I went back to Little Rock. And so while I was sitting down doing that, got a phone call from a high major assistant coach saying, "Man, I see all your content for that Arkansas practice. It's pretty cool. I know that's kind of one of your things," but he goes, really? Cal, that's pretty neat deal that he had y'all in there. And I'm like, yeah, it really was. We were talking a little bit about that. It's not a high major assistant on a team that's going to play Arkansas this season unless there's another high major that gets added to the non-conference, and it's his school on top of what we've already talked about. So there's that. And no questions about, well, what do they do? Nothing like that. Just, really more casual about that stuff. And then we started talking players, and one of the comments that came out was, Cal just does what he does. out on the circuit, and he goes, it'd be interesting to see how July plays out, because this coach said he's hearing that Arkansas has real momentum. I put it in quotes, real momentum with Jordan Smith Jr., and that's kind of the scuttlebutt. That's coaches talk, and they may not talk as much about what they're doing and who they're zeroed in on. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They want that mystery out there, but they talk about where other schools are and what it's looking like. And long shot to get in on a guy because it looks like maybe this team's got it locked up or that kind of thing. So in this scenario, this coach basically said, without me bringing it up, man, Jordan Smith Jr. Arkansas's got real momentum. He said Calipari. Calipari has real momentum there. And I asked the question, are you saying that Arkansas leads? Because you hear Duke, Georgetown, some other schools. And he, just basically said, right now, he goes, if it's not Arkansas, he goes, I don't know who it would be. So that's not exactly saying that Arkansas is the leader, but it sounds pretty promising and heading in a good direction for Arkansas. So I thought that was pretty interesting, coming from a high major assistant coach, extending that credit. I don't see, this wasn't like a call that was placed to plant something either. It was just, again, casual conversations, and how that leads to other things that you talk about. And sometimes you can get some good stuff out of that. That's my experience. So I thought that was really interesting. And it prompted me later to reach out to one of my contacts in basketball circles in that area, East Coast, Virginia area, and just reached out to get a feeling, to get a read on it, and just say, I know Arkansas's prioritized him. Now, we've talked about that forever. They've really put a premium on Jordan Smith Jr., and I made the comparison to one of Calipari's better recent guards, in his last 2 years at Kentucky, Cason Wallace, and what he's already done in the NBA, and how there's such a really good player comp here in terms of the two-way value, especially an elite defender, similar size. They're connectors, glue guys. It doesn't matter which end of the court it is. And it's not about flash. You think five-star, you think big numbers sometimes, flashy stuff, and he's just not that guy. He just impacts winning. If that's not enough flash for you, I don't know what gets it done, but that kind of thing. And so, this source I have in talking, Virginia high school basketball, I just asked, I said, I know Arkansas is prioritizing, but where do you think, who do you think's maybe in the lead here? Who's in that's in really hot pursuit here, and zeroing in on this guy. And the list I got back were the three teams I just mentioned: Arkansas, Duke, and Georgetown. Then I asked, well, who would you, if you had to call it right now, if it was decision was made now, who do you think would be? Did not, basically, it's not committing to that, saying something like that right now. So you've got one high major assistant coach saying Arkansas's got real momentum, or Calipari does in this recruitment, which is Arkansas by association, right? And the other one acknowledging that Arkansas is in the top three. We've seen some of that. Arkansas is mentioned just about by every national recruiting analyst. One of the first schools you see mentioned. But to have this guy kind of locked in that area. Now, Georgetown under Ed Cooley, that's a program that could turn things around, and plays in the Big East. And Jordan Smith Jr., when you think about Cooley teams at Providence and where he's been before, some of those tough, gritty East Coast guys, Jordan Smith fits that billing. So that would be a good fit for him. Doesn't have the cachet that Calipari does, getting guys developed and off to the next level, which adds a whole new thing. Obviously, NIL will play a part in this. But the fact that, Calipari has such a great track record, especially even more in more recent years with those backcourt guys, it makes sense to me why there's a perception out there that Cal's got real momentum. But to hear Georgetown, Duke's been a name that a lot of folks think Duke is a front runner there. Some other ones you talk to are not so sure about that. Not so sure about that. So that's where it is. That's the intel there. We're nearly 10 minutes in. Let's move on now. So we'll see where it goes. Jordan Smith Jr. was the MVP of the, according to the circuit, which does a lot of coverage on spring and summer grassroots basketball. When you go back to Nike EYBL, they had three sessions that played out in May. One of those was a live eval period. That was the one in Memphis where I was at, Calipari and Chin Coleman were at. But when you add all of it up, the circuit judged Jordan Smith Jr. to be the MVP of the entire May spring circuit. So here we are in July. Nike is obviously Peach Jam. Everything starts today with the live eval stuff, by the way. Again, Nike Peach Jam, Adidas has its event. Under Armour has its event. Puma Pro 16 has its event. And so all of this stuff is starting today. And I will tell you this, Arkansas will be back with eyes on Jordan Smith Jr. Not only was the MVP of circuit play in May for Nike, but he just got the defensive player of FIBA U19 World Cup. Team USA went 7-0, won the gold medal, and he got most outstanding defensive player or the defensive player of the event, however they phrase it. That was so he keeps racking up more than just people talking about his promise or what he brings to the table. He's actually got receipts for that, going up against the best players, not only in the country, but in the world at his age. And so now he shifts back into spring and summer, or now summer basketball on the shoe circuit, back with Nike EYBL. And Arkansas coaches will be courtside, I promise you, for probably every one of his games. And so we'll see how much more real momentum, quote unquote, Arkansas can attach to that and make him a priority. Now, he has stated publicly that he intends to visit Arkansas as one of the schools. Kentucky was another one after Nike Peach Jam. Arkansas. How soon is it that he makes that visit? And it sounds to me, if there's real momentum, that this isn't one of those things that's just going to kind of fade into the backdrop and not never happen. But things change in recruiting. You never know. We'll see what plays out through July. Got to get through that. But that's coming up. Here in later in the month, at the conclusion of Nike Peach Jam, was around the time that Darius Acuff Jr. committed to Arkansas after visiting in May. So obviously this won't be on that kind of fast track, but you already have J.J. Andrews, who, by the way, also starts play this weekend back, and he's been outstanding. The circuit had him on their first team, all Nike EYBL for the spring, and so no shock there. And has moved all the way up in ESPN's rankings to 12th. Jordan Smith Jr. 3rd. I said both of these guys because of how good they are and locked in they are at both ends to details and how good they are defensively. You put those two together and you have something really special, even when they're freshmen. These are guys that are going to be hard to get off the court, even as true freshmen, knowing how Calipari will, within combination of retention and what little he gets out of the portal with veteran guys, these guys are going to have major impact immediately. So if you could get Jordan Smith Jr. with J.J. Andrews, you've arguably got the top class early if you can get this guy committed soon. Now, there have been folks that say Jordan Smith Jr. May wait until the spring. He may be one of those players that waits to see what some teams are doing in terms of through the portal and, what does the roster look like? If Arkansas is right there with a chance to nab him, I'll be surprised if Calipari it drags out that long. Maybe it would, but Calipari has already shown that he's not recruiting over his top level high school guys. He just hasn't done it. If you look at his two portal classes at Arkansas, and he spoke on this yesterday, I'm only going to take one or two out of the portal. He's only taken two each year, and it's not been anybody that's competing with his young guys. He's brought in mostly freshmen that are backcourt, wing, guard, 1, 2, and 3s. And what he's done on the portal are frontline guys. Nelly Davis, the lone exception, because his first high school class that he brought with him from Kentucky was a lead guard and 2 wings. He didn't have a 2, so he had to. He has not recruited over him. So proof of concept, what the business he's able to do to help these players get not only drafted in preferred slots, and then what they're able to do after that. Great track record there. Why would you wait if Arkansas is a school that you're really serious about and maybe your leader? Maybe. I mean, who knows if Arkansas is. So I tend to think if he's going to wait, it means he's also maybe really, really strongly considering some other team maybe closer to home, like a Georgetown, right in his backyard, or if it's Duke, and that's why you might play a long game to see what those teams are doing, portal wise and such. But as far as Arkansas goes, I don't think right now, based on this information, I don't think there's any reason to think that Calipari's not going to continue to put his foot on the pedal in pursuit of this guy. I think it's just going to continue to intensify in ways that Calipari knows he can make it work. And so whether Arkansas gets him or not is another thing. But I think the process right now sounds promising. So there we go. Mika Murinen, back to that, reclass or not, he's dropping a top 7 tomorrow. And will Arkansas be on the list? We'll see. Arkansas has recruited him consistently. There was a time where I didn't think Arkansas would be in on him for a reclass. Then it got to a point where they were recruiting him and the staff acknowledged they were recruiting him either way. But I'm hearing more and more lately that some teams are backing off of him as a reclass. Not that they're going to let go of the ropes on recruiting him for 2026. And so his whole plan and source information, there's been enough of it to suggest that his camp has intended for him to reclass if they get the NIL and roll right. But I'm hearing there may be fewer takers right now on something like that than there were 5 or 6 weeks ago. Could Arkansas, not knowing this, could Arkansas be one of those teams that's backed off a little bit? We don't know. And we'll see if Arkansas is on the list. On a top 7, some of those schools, there might be a little fluff in that. And maybe some have moved on or, they whatever, and you just put them in there because it looks good. Who knows? But for now, I can't say either way if Arkansas is one of the schools that's kind of backing off of the reclass thing, only that there are some that have. And that might leave him in a situation where if he wants to reclass, the NIL and the projected role aren't where he wants it, and he just stays 2026. I think that's been part of the roller coaster. There are some real question marks with him, and maybe some stuff we'll talk about more at another time on that part of it. So let's see. Let's see where this goes. I know a lot of people are excited. They'd like to see that. Arkansas is at a point now where they've got 15, but because Aiden Kelly apparently was a true walk-on last year, not a on athletic scholarship. He's grandfathered into the not counting toward the 15 total that you can take between scholarship and walk-ons. So Amir Brown is a first-year walk-on. He counts toward the 15. Aiden Kelly apparently doesn't because Calipari said yesterday. We tweeted it. We talked about it on the post-practice episode that he's going out. He said he's going out to see a player this weekend that he might add to this roster, who would be more of a developmental, long-term sort of a retention guy, multiple year guy, which screams development piece, like the kind of the 2 big men they added here a few weeks ago, which we've said are really more so developmental. Would be another player like that, it sounds like, which could be an unsigned senior. Maybe it's an international guy that's not quite ready for prime time. They put their eyes on a bunch of those. We know FIBA U19 was an opportunity to do that. There's more than one way to get that done. And so we'll see what comes of that. And if we are talking about another edition fairly soon, just to bring that up, I think Calipari usually when he brings things up, he's kind of telegraphing stuff for us. He's not usually talking about something frivolous that I don't think he's going to bring something like that up unless he's telling you, keep your eyes on this. We may be adding someone else. And so just something to consider here. As we've said all along, we think Arkansas is looking to finish out this roster. I really think they were open to adding someone else who might be able to push their way into that top 9. And they just never did get the right situation that they felt like would not maybe unsettle the apple cart with a locked-in top 8 that they feel so strongly about. And when we go through the UA practice stuff, the Arkansas practice stuff, I'm going to start with what Calipari said. We talked about it yesterday. I'm going to go a little deeper with it, but they do. The proof is in the pudding, and the fact that they just didn't go out and really add someone that immediately is going to fit in there. And so it doesn't surprise me if he's adding someone now that's developmental. And we always said this could go multiple ways because they are happy with what they have. Anybody thinking at some point we went from could they get another splash guy to maybe it's a depth piece? I think the depth piece part, again, a valid one, was something they were kicking the tires on multiple things, and now they're to a point where they're probably just going to get another developmental guy. And so we always said that was something that could happen too. All right, let's get into the practice portion of things. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't already. That always helps us out. My biggest takeaway, I kind of put these in order. I think my biggest takeaway yesterday, and I said this yesterday, but we'll do it again on this one. Calipari, it's not just his comfort level, but there's a confidence level. He likes his team. Again, remember he said that last year. He made sure to say how much he really enjoyed coaching that team and how things ended up. He got a lot of praise around the country for even from some of the naysayers about what an excellent job he did. You have to acknowledge that, especially with the injuries and attrition and the numbers, how low they got. There's no doubt about that. He likes his team again, but I think the difference is his perception of this group to start the season. I think it's much different. And again, a lot of that's being in a new environment, new territory. Personally, your staff, even the guys that you retained from the previous team, they've got new environment. You've assembled a team from scratch, in a sense. It's obvious that coming into year two, when you had the kind of retention and some things, that you're going to have more confidence. But I think his perception goes deeper than just confidence. I think he's got real belief that this team can go a long way. And we talked about it yesterday, the tough non-conference scheduling. And he spoke on that in the post-practice presser. We did that because we think we're built for that. Not for, I'm not sure what I've got. We need to be tested like that before we get an SEC play. Yeah, there's an element of that for sure, right? But the other part is, hey, we've got the arsenal. Let's bring the best. Bring on these best teams. And so that's part of it. What we didn't expand on yesterday, and it just kind of more and more you put it all together, and we've talked about these things more independently at times, but you add to that the fact that they've implemented now. We talked about it from the source info last week, how they ran a lot of 4-on-4 and 5-on-5. That's exactly what we saw yesterday. Whereas last year it was individual development in the June and July portions. That's really all they focused on. They were it's almost like starting from scratch in a sense. This time around, they've done a lot more with the team stuff. And I think that says he has a lot of trust in the guys he brought back, the young guys he's brought in, what he got out of the portal, just the whole combination of it. I think he's feeling like there's less he has to do in the very roots of the foundation, and more that he can expand on now as opposed to maybe waiting a little bit later. Why wait if you feel better about some things being a foundation where maybe you didn't feel that last year? Some of that's, again, being new, but some of it was dictated by injuries, those kind of things. Right now, things are in some kind of harmony, and I think he's embracing that. And I think that goes more to his perception of where this team is and what it can do. And again, if you go back and think about the portal season and how we were all clamoring for more, and it's just a knee jerk to what the previous staff did. Calipari's been consistent, 2 players each cycle, but they just didn't scramble. They didn't get into bidding wars. They didn't scramble because they could have got a big name. They just didn't do that. Calipari stuck to his knitting based on this belief in what he has. It's all consistent. It all makes sense. He's not saying one thing and then you look at his actions and go, yeah, you're saying this, but you kind of, you took a flyer here. You did it. They didn't do any of that. None of it. And we're scratching our head going, well, that guy's really good and you can get him. And that guy, those things can be true. What also can be true is it's not just about offending the players you have and scaring them. It's about, if you really see a process that you have and you've got the bullets, you think you've got what you need, you're not going to, tempt fate there. Now you got to go prove it, But I think we just look at how this team recruited, how Calipari recruited in the spring, and it lines up with all the stuff that we're getting into now about the quality of what he's assembled. So they didn't scramble to add any kind of key pieces in portal or anything late, and now it's developmental guys, which is fine because he's maybe expanding his thoughts on what retention looks like moving forward, especially in this era, with the revenue sharing. And so, he's got to manage that. He said, I don't have enough NIL money to pay 12 quality guys to make up a roster. And you're only going to really play 8 or 9 anyway, in terms of what you're doing game in and game out through a season. So it's always going to come down to, do you have issues with injuries? And Arkansas dealt with that. It hurt at first, and then at the end, they just continue to win no matter what. So he's going to have to juggle that and have a fine line. Right now, knock on wood, team's healthy. And I think the other thing he said, which we did not bring up yesterday, is that what he sees now at Arkansas, the time he's been here just over a year, he looks at this as what he's doing here and what he will do here is the same as the other places. And then he went through them: UMass, Memphis, Kentucky. And you can say, well, one of those teams is different than the others, one of those programs. Sure, Kentucky's a blue blood. But every place he's been, he took to a Final Four. He's had wild success every college stop. And so that's what he's talking about. And I don't think he's going to say something like that without feeling some real momentum with what he has now. So, I mean, we can debate whether or not we agree that he did enough in terms of having another quality depth piece, in terms of the perimeter shooting, which I think is, if I'm going off what I saw yesterday, I'm going to say that's a weakness right now. We can nitpick anything. No team's perfect. No situation's that, it's on their best day, they're not that good. On their worst day, they're not that bad, right? But I think he feels like he's got a real sense on the pulse of what he's got. And think about all the success he has. That's the point. And so to say we're going to do here what we've done at every other stop, and we're this is the same scenario, to me says a lot. And it also tells me he's got confidence in what he has now to even go there. And so that's my biggest takeaway from everything, is just the global look at it. Let's jump into probably my second biggest takeaway would be to talk about Trevor Brazile again. But I'm going to start kind of breaking it down with offensive strengths and weaknesses and then defense as well. We'll do it more team first, and then we'll get into individual players. But I think the strengths to me, and I mentioned this yesterday, I brought it up during the press conference to both players and Calipari when we got to that point. I really thought the strength offensively was Arkansas's big man guard interaction, the dribble handoffs, the pick and rolls. And it wasn't just what was really good were the decisions by the guards getting the ball to the big men, knowing who their big men were. And when it was Nick Pringle, lobbed the basket. You can do the same with Trevor Brazile. You can do the same with Malik Ewing. They all have that ability. But you really saw some of the timing looked good on some of that. Some of it was still a little rough. But even the initial point of the pick exchange and the movement off of that, even if the startup was a little rough, they finished most of those plays really well. Good passes, good decision, good timing and placement on passes. And that was DJ Wagner, Darius Acup Jr., and we saw probably more of Malik Thomas than anybody else in those scenarios because they put him in them. The ball was in his hands when the whistle blew to start that action and some of the drill work. And then we saw more of it when they went to the team stuff, 4v4, 5v5. But I thought the strength that already stands out to me is just the downhill action, again, off DHO and pick and roll. Pick and pop's going to be interesting because this team right now, to me, has some issues shooting the ball, and we thought they would. We thought they would. Was there a pathway to do what they did last year, which wasn't great? Could they even get a little better? And we don't know yet. We were in there for an hour. Who knows where this goes? But based on that hour, that's one of the weaknesses is 3-point shooting. But the downhill action and the way that the guards played during that, we did not see guards off that action really create a whole lot for themselves in terms of a shot. But they didn't really have to, because when they just read what defenders were doing in whether it was drop coverage or just a slight hesitation by a defender or a misstep. They really took advantage of it with, again, a pass that was on target on time and led to an easy finish for the bigs. And I think one of the offensive strengths of this team is going to be the front line. We thought they had a path to that last year. Big Z was inconsistent, but he was an effective three-point shooter. He could pass, but you had a hard time when you finally found a formula to start winning games. You had a hard time keeping him on the floor because of the defensive issues and the lack of rebounding and some of that lack of toughness and lack of being locked in. He was also a bit turnover prone. I think this group gives and then you had Jonas Adu, who was hurt. It took forever to get him rounded out. Trevor in Brazil, inconsistent, a few nicks and bruises, and then he finally really turned it on at the end of the year. So we never really saw that front line at its best on either end. But offensively, what we're talking now, I think these bigs give Arkansas, because of their ability to finish off this downhill action, but they can finish with force. And I think that's another thing that Arkansas lacked last year from the front line. This group can finish with force. Trevor in Brazil taking on body contact, and it's not slowing him down. He's not hesitating. Nick Pringle, good luck, running a wall in front of him. Malik Ewan, who I'd like to see use that frame a little more physically. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But he's just so gifted as a finisher. It doesn't have to be with force with him, but he can get up to the rim and cram it, right? I mean, he had over 50 dunks last year. So there's a force element to just how he abuses that rim, right? So I think this group, when we talk about the downhill action, it's not just about your slashers that are handling the ball, but it's these guys that they're looking to. And so now as defenders, you're in peril. The problem is you can't always succeed that way. You need some element of kick out, because defenses sometimes will handle your options off those reads, off that initial two-man action. And now there's going to be a second and third pass out to the perimeter, and there's going to probably be somebody open if you did the job defensively as the ball's moving and attacking the paint. So now you got to have guys that can knock down open shots. The best guys doing that yesterday were the big men as well. And you say, well, that throws a wrinkle into it for those big men maybe playing some pick and pop. Trevor in Brazil. Malik Ewan, the reports were when we came on from the source information from that coach was in there for 2 practices. Malik Ewan it was his offensive skill, shooting skill, and he was knocking down some threes. Well, we saw that yesterday. Saw Ewan shooting well from 3, sometimes in shell work if there's no defender. But he's just got a really nice touch on the ball. He attempted 1 3-pointer in 30. I think he played in 44 college games prior to coming into this season. The 2022-23 season, Ole Miss played in only 14 games. Last year, started all 30, and that was his 1 3-point attempt. He didn't make it. So you're telling me that this guy's going to be adding something to his game that he has just simply not done, period. And so I got to see that against live bullets in games that it matters to believe that. Remember, when you're watching a practice, you're seeing guys go up against their teammates, and you've got players kind of on both sides. You've got, if you're going 4-on-4 or 5-on-5, you're dividing players up. Some guys you won't be seeing that much. You don't know all the combinations that'll really play out when you're just putting 5 on the court at a time. And so is he a guy that when he's out there, that's what you want him doing? Is that going to be one of his strengths? I don't know. But if 3-point shooting's a question mark, and arguably the 2 best 3-point shooters consistently yesterday were two of your bigs, that's either a promising thing and they're going to help you be better there, or it goes away and you really don't see much of it. I think with Brazil we will, because that's a proof of concept, especially late in the year, efficient and volume-wise. And for his career, he's been efficient. Malik Ewan's attempted 1 3-pointer in a career, and he's a veteran guy. So hadn't played a ton of college games, but at this point, if you get some of that out of him, he's a different player than he's ever been. That's the point. And so maybe that's a good thing if it happens and it works. I'm just not sold on it is where I'm going with that. So I still think 3-point shooting is a question mark, but I do think it's intriguing with how good the bigs were in downhill stuff. Do you have two of your three bigs? Because we know Brazil can do it. Are you going to have two that can knock down threes? Because that also then puts some more pressure for defenses scheming against you and game planning for you and scouting you. Because if you know it's always going to be downhill stuff, you may not be able to stop it all the time, but you know you can leave guys open on the other end if you can force another pass. And it's not, and you don't give an easy, you don't get it. Arkansas doesn't get an easy score off the downhill stuff. So it's stuff like that that are going to matter. When I look at Billy Richmond III yesterday, he knocked down some threes, in some competitive part and in some of the drill work where there wasn't really a defender on him, and he made some nice mid-range shots. I talked about it yesterday. He had a nice decision. I think it was over Isaiah Sealy. I talked about this little turnaround shot. He looked real comfortable, like he'd done it before, and so that was nice. But he did knock down some threes. Isaiah Sealy, if I'm calling out any wing guard that looked comfortable shooting threes, he's probably the one that has the best looking stroke right now. Malik Thomas, we think can be that, but he struggled for a bit shooting from distance. Now he made some, but until I see more of that consistency from him, I'm not sold that he's going to be that high volume, efficient guy from three. Sealy is your ninth guy. And so we know, where we think there's a certain impact kind of roles for the top eight, how Sealy fits in, he'll play, but how consistent is that? And if he's your best perimeter shooter, that may help him get on the court and get more minutes. But this is, again, 1 hour of practice time. But on the other side, we thought 3-point shooting was going to be an issue based on what we've seen out of the players that Arkansas has, whether it's coming from the high school level or what they've shown in college already. So that's one of the big head scratchers right now. I think the other thing that I really liked about the team offensively was everybody's willingness to move the ball. Acuff, where we know he can score, and he banged his knee early in practice. I was putting video out, and I noticed he was kind of hobbling a little bit. He played through that. I think it was just a stinger. But he didn't take a lot of shots. And in the drill work, he didn't really shoot particularly well. But he did a really good job, again, of handling. I thought his timing, I always talk about how well he plays with pace at the high school level. I thought his pace timing was a little off at times, but that's expected at this level. It's a big leap to the next level. And that's why you do this stuff now, is to get guys comfortable and acclimated, or in Calipari's case, put them in situations that make them uncomfortable, and build, because they already have certain strengths, so you want to get them stronger in their weak areas. But I thought Acuff probably struggled a little bit at times yesterday, but the decision making and his choices not to make it about just keep shooting to shoot through it. Instead, he was making the right passes. And again, on time, on target. I thought that showed a level of maturity. I talked about that yesterday. So I was impressed with him in a lot of, in a lot of these scenarios where you could easily just pick it apart and say, well, when he shot, he didn't shoot well, and it looked like he didn't want to shoot. I'm going to go ahead and defer to the fact that in a lot of this stuff, he was really showing that at a 6'2" lead guard, that it's important to get his teammates involved. And he did it in a smart way. So I liked what he did, especially again in that two-man action. That's where he's really, I think, going to thrive both as a scorer and again a facilitator. We saw much more of the facilitator stuff. DJ Wagner, again, really what you see with him is just those hard drives in and going window, getting in for those. We had one swooping lefty that went high off the glass over a defender, after driving down the left side of the lane. And, it's the same kind of work we've seen from him. Really struggled shooting from three. Defensively, he's a guy that I always like because he's strongly built and, he's not perfect defensively, but he continues to get better there. And he has a physical aspect in the backcourt that I like there. And they worked a lot defensively as Calipari said, what a lot of what we saw was just guys. The drills were aimed at keeping guys in front of defenders in front of their man on the ball, and so where you're not getting beat. Well, we saw guys get beat, but that's what they're really focused on working on. There were some guys that got beat off the dribble yesterday. Some of it kind of caught me off guard. Carter Knox on that one video that I put out where Isaiah Seeley went baseline on him, and it wasn't that hard for him to do it, and got a nice finish there. But defensively, I think it has a chance again to be a top 15 defense, top 20, because of the physicality, because of the really good footwork that you see with Nick Pringle. He's a guy that when you switch out, when you get in the defensively in that two-man action, Arkansas's bigs last year, if you remember, it was just trouble, man. They just couldn't. And then the tag on the rolls and different things. Arkansas was dysfunctional for a while, and some things just kind of remained average at best. I think Arkansas's bigs, especially the way Brazil's playing, and what Nick Pringle brings, those two guys, I'm really impressed with what they're doing in terms of with Pringle. It's proactive footwork. So if he's a guy that you could be okay with on switches. That was a thing that Arkansas struggled with against him last year in that game on the road in South Carolina. But I think Brazil, because I saw him breaking up plays and because I've seen him playing with more force and dealing with physicality better, I think it's a fair to say now that both he and Pringle will be pluses on that front line defensively in a multitude of scenarios. Again, some of the switching stuff, the physicality part of it. The rim protection's another thing. We'll see, but we know TB can block shots. I think Pringle probably can too, at a higher volume than he did last year. Is what I'm saying there. And so the one question mark I have defensively on the front line against Malik Ewan. Calipari said offensively he hesitates some. He decelerates when they want him to accelerate, and I think he was defensively yesterday. He's got the body. He's got the size. I could tell that he's an offensive-minded guy. I'll put it that way. On the defensive end, I'm not saying that he's just, lollygagging or, kind of mailing it in. I just think that, either he's not proactive when he should be or his reactions are a little bit slow. And you're like, well, he's in position here and someone still gets by him. The bigs, we talked about how they did on the rolls. They also, when they pop out high and the ball moves back to them, did a good job, especially Trevor Brazil and Nick Pringle, offensively of getting downhill and just putting the ball on the deck once or twice and getting all the way to the basket. Defensively, if they're using this stuff offensively to get buckets and get downhill, defensively, I think they'll be capable of cutting some of that stuff off. So you kind of win at both ends. I think that they've got the ability to make those plays on one end. On the other end, I think they've got the ability against other big men to maybe prevent that. With Ewan, I think there's trade-off. I think offensively, he's going to give teams matchup nightmares. But I think defensively, at least now the way I see it, he's sort of a guy you're going to scout and try to go at him in situations. So I didn't know if I articulated that the best, trying to transition what their strengths are offensively to maybe what some of the hang-ups defensively were. If you remember, that was the thing with Big Z. What you were getting offensively, you weren't getting defensively. He'd block a few shots, but everything else was just the teams went right at him. I don't think it's that glaring, and I think what helps Ewan is the fact that he is a strong rebounder, offensively and defensively. Pringle is. This version of TB is. We know Carter Knox and Billy Richmond are going to get their share. And so I think this team, when I look at it, both ends, because we were kind of breaking it up, offense and then defense, when we look at both ends, I think it's going to be a strong rebounding team, and that includes Malik Ewan. So whereas he may have some defensive deficiencies, I think he's going to rebound the basketball and close out defensive possessions with rebounds. And so there's always value in that. We always think about guys, getting cooked or, getting put in a blender or maybe, a little slow reacting. But at the end of the day, if you've got a guy getting on the glass and closing out a defensive possession with a rebound, there's value there. And so I think let's go ahead and credit Malik Ewan there. The backcourt, or the wings, Billy Richmond III is just a dog, man. He's better. He's bigger. His confidence, his attack mode stuff is escalating. I think his shots improved. Mentioned that from the source that was in the building. Remember, for the two practices, saying he was impressed with Billy Richmond III's shooting looks better. Well, that's what it looked like yesterday. How much better when it matters is to be determined. But just his willingness to be a physical player at both ends. Defensively, I think Carter Knox got so much better at the end of the year defensively, learned how to use his frame at both ends, playing bully ball. He just looks, yesterday to me, remember when we did the source information on the coach that was at two practices, I keep referring to that because what we saw yesterday backed up what he was telling me. Remember, he went through a bunch of players, and then I had to ask about Carter Knox. Remember, that was one of the guys I had to ask about because he didn't bring him up. And he just said, I think he's just getting his legs. He's just getting back into the mix. He'll get there. He didn't, there wasn't anything flattering to talk about yet. It's kind of like that yesterday. There was some really good bully ball finishes. What would, look like a lot of contact, like at the end of the year, when we saw, or the midpoint of the season through the end of the year, where Knox was taking on contact in transition in the half court, that kind of thing. And he got better and better, and then generating those free throw attempts. Remember, that was kind of the Thero where he led the team. Then he went out, and it was Knox picked up that slack. But Knox showed some of that again. Didn't really see him shoot much. They're not, they didn't run any on ball when they were doing the 3-on-3 drill work. They were starting the ball off in the hands of Acuff, DJ, and then Malik Thomas mostly. And you didn't see a lot of on-ball activity for guys initially like Billy Richmond III or Carter Knox. And it was more about, weak side, slashing in, rim running, and they got their opportunities kind of that way. Billy Richmond probably did a little better job of one or two bounces and creating a mid-range shot. Didn't see a lot of that from Carter. TV looked thicker. Good show. Appreciate your hard work. Thank you for the comments. So we just didn't see a lot of Knox. And then some of the stuff defensively, I was surprised. And I think it's timing. I think it's just being out. He was focused on the pro thing for a while. He came back, remember, and then he took a few days off. We've talked about all this, and brought that up as probably really weighing into why the coach that had been out there for a couple of practices didn't have much to say. Not a whole lot again yesterday. And I really don't worry about it. I think it's just a matter of, if we were to go back out there in a week or 2 weeks, we might see a whole different Carter Knox by that point. So let him ramp it up and get done what he wants, do it on his timeline. As long as it arrives sooner rather than later, I'm sure, for John Calipari, who, by the way, said he'll probably look at bringing back the media back when they come back from summer break, which is usually 2 weeks after the limited stuff, right before school, and they'll come back when school starts sometime in September. Maybe they'd get us back in there. All right, so we've talked about a lot of players as it pertains to offense and defense. I talked some about Malik Thomas yesterday and how Calipari was saying he's a bucket getter, but a lot of the dribbling, over dribbling. And we were making comparisons before, the alpha mentality, all that shot craft and creation, and a lot of talent, and just that belief in self. And if comparing to Nick Smith Jr., who's also been a player where the higher you go up, the more you have to really embrace the idea of less is more on the dribble setup. And Nick is still working through that, going into year 3 in the NBA. And so Malik's kind of similar there. And I tweeted out during the 5-on-5 where he struck for like 3 buckets in 4 out of the 4 consecutive possessions for the team, for the red team yesterday in that 5-on-5. So you saw glimpses. One of them was a mid-range pull-up where he wasn't, pounding that ball too much. It looked good. Another one, he got a steal and finished in transition. And you like to see that defensively from him. He's going to take some gambles. He'll risk some stuff to jump a passing lane. But I think Arkansas, again, because of their size, athleticism, length, the force that the front line plays with, And then guys again like Knox and Billy Richmond III, who I think will be plus defenders again, like they showed at the end of the last season. Malik Thomas is a guy that's going to be able to maybe take some gambles, but offensively, you don't want him gambling as much, and I think that's the difference. You want him to be sound defensively, but you'll a guy like that, you might not mind gambling a little bit defensively, but on offense, it's one of those things. If he gets on a heater, you might be okay with it. Like Calipari says, if you're going to take some of those shots, you better make them, or I can't play you. And so it's one of those things where a lot of times with true freshmen, even regardless of the talent level, you can learn some hard lessons quick. I think Carter Knox was one of those guys halfway through the season last year, and then we saw what he did the second half when he became a less is more guy. He wasn't hunting as many shots, wasn't taking as many early shots or bad shots, wasn't dribbling as much. Now, I think Malik Thomas is a more gifted scorer and shot creator and a more gifted three-point shooting talent when we make comparisons to Knox at this stage. But at the same time, you want to do it smartly. Catch and shoot. You don't have to take another dribble and go find a different shot when you've got an open shot there. One or two dribbles to get to a spot. So you want to economize. I always talk about players that's one of their strengths. That's something they're going to work on to help hopefully get him ramped up sooner rather than later as a freshman to bring some of that. But offensively, I think Malik, outside of that, is probably, from what I saw yesterday, more capable of scoring in a multitude of ways in the backcourt. I really think DJ Wagner remains mostly a slasher, get to the basket kind of guy. He's if he's knocking down some threes, and we saw him really streaky last year, basically a 30% shooter, so not streaky necessarily in a good way consistently, but he'd have games where he'd have hit two or three, and those were those games where maybe he had a big second half because he started hitting some threes there in a little cluster. So I don't really see anything that's moved the needle and improved from that. Calipari said he'd been shooting well, just didn't yesterday. But that's kind of things Calipari said about him in the past, yet the percentages and what we see are what they are. So we'll see. We'll see if there's movement there. Acuff, again, we always said the drive, get to the basket, the little float game, the little runner game, a lot of question marks about his three-point shooting. And we didn't see as much offense from him. But the ability to slash, to get into mid-range shots, to shoot from three, maybe shoot from three in volume, Malik Thomas is probably the guy that has more of a package of ways he can score in your backcourt than anybody. But the true freshman factor comes in, the discipline factor in terms of decision-making and how to get those shots. Those are the big question marks. I think the best player, I said yesterday, the top performer was Trevor Brazile. And I stand by that. But if you want to put it in a different context for Brazile, and you said, if you had to say watching 1 hour who the best player on the team is, if you brought someone in just off the street who hasn't seen Arkansas play, and you said, who's the best player on the team? If they're smart, they're going to say, well, I only saw 1 hour of practice, I'm not sure, but if I'm basing it off this 1 hour, it's pretty clearly Trevor Brazile. I thought at both ends that was the case. He is playing. He hesitated so much in his career when he gets the ball, or hesitates and sometimes ball watch defensively. And then you'd have the wow plays where he seemed locked in. You're going, whoa! If he taps into that, he's what the previous head coach said. He's a top 5 player in the SEC. Those kinds of things. We've always said, a locked in, healthy, consistent playing Trevor Brazile is an all league kind of guy. The guy I saw yesterday, and I said it yesterday when we did the post practice show, not only is he just continuing what he did at the end of last season, but the fact that he's gotten bigger, stronger, and I'm seeing fewer of those ball watching, flat footed, hesitation, not sure what to do. He's a lot more proactive. He's a lot more confident. He has built on it. He's like a runaway snowball, on a ski slope. The guys just get the snowball's getting bigger. I think it's his confidence. Calipari talked about it. He's smiling now. the way he conducted himself during his part of the presser yesterday is not like something I've seen from him in terms of really being engaged. Not that he's a bad dude or anything. Kind of the word I used yesterday was stoic. Sort of kind of quiet, and sometimes it comes off as aloof. That wasn't the guy speaking yesterday that we've seen, and the way that he's playing, which matters more than anything, that speaks more volumes. Trevor Brazil, to me, if you ask me today who the best player on the team is, it's him. It's him. All right. So that's how I see that. Again, Knox has got some catching up to do at both ends. And I think it's mostly about, I wouldn't say conditioning. He looks good. He continues to take care of himself. Remember, he was a guy that had extra weight when he came in as a freshman, started to improve on that. I think he's continued down that path. I just think it's a matter of really getting locked back in to being a college player again. I think his timing looks off. He's still probably feeling out some of the newcomers, some of the newness with this team. He hasn't been around guys in that building as much as those guys were in there doing pickup stuff since arriving on campus before they ever got to doing team stuff, the 4 hours a week that's allowed. And so Knox is a little bit behind. So that was what stood out the most to me. I think he'll be fine again. I'm not really worried about it. Pringle and Ewan, really good additions. I think, again, Pringle's defensive versatility, he's not a Duke Thero. I don't think he's that versatile defensively. But when you're 6'10", pushing 6'11", 230, built like he is, there are other elements that he brings in that defensive versatility that Arkansas just didn't have from those kind of players last year. And I think, again, the enforcer part of that is something I can't wait to see because Arkansas just didn't have one of those. And Ewan, he might be the most offensively skilled player on the front line when I think about just the ability to create shots in different ways for himself and the ability to knock those down since Bobby Portis. Arkansas's had some good frontline players. Jalen Williams, a good offensive player because of his passing and his high floor IQ, and he can knock down some threes. But I think with Ewan, you're going to see putbacks and back to some low post and mid post work where he turns over his shoulder, goes one direction or the other, backing guys down. He's a good passer. Again, the defensive part we talk about Ewan, I think, is where the big question mark is. Billy Richmond III, he obviously, to me, seems more locked in right now than where Carter Knox is and has improved. He's going to be a player that's really hard to keep off the court. I think his versatility, again, defensively, he was already a fearless guy. He just looks bigger and stronger on top of that, and he's still got the bounce, and he's improved his shot. I mean, with him, it's really about eliminating the head scratch and turnovers and some of those things. And so I think I was, to me, when I start talking about a team that maybe can get to the final weekend, he's the kind of guy I'm looking at going, he's a huge part of that. He's a huge part of that. Trevor Brazil, we know Carter Knox, we know DJ Wagner, that retention. You're going to have to get a lot out of these next two names I'm going to bring up, Acuff and Malik Thomas. There's a lot of room for growth for both, and you're relying on a lot from those true freshmen. If you're talking about the kind of caliber team we think this can be, basically you've got a lead guard in Acuff, a combo guard in DJ, and a two in Malik Thomas. You got Billy Richmond III that does have some versatility, but not really a shooter, scorer type. And then Carter Knox, who we need to see where year two goes. We think he's going to increase everything, but he was a pretty modest shot taker and efficient. It got to that point, but he certainly can build on it. But you're still going to have to get production from these guys. I still think Acuff, based on what I've seen prior to yesterday, could end up being Arkansas's leading scorer. But I even like it better if, let's say, he's Arkansas's leading scorer at 13 or 14 points a game, and you got five guys averaging double figures, close to what he's doing, plus he's leading the team in assists and running things. I might like that version better than a guy that's going out and getting 18, 19, 20 points, which I think he's capable of doing. I don't know if that serves the team as well and they're as good as they can be. So that's a little bit of a shift in my thinking with what I want to see from Acuff, because I was pleased with, again, the lead guard qualities yesterday. His pace timing is not as good as I've seen, but that's part of this new scenery for him in the college level, the high major level. That I think he'll acclimate. And again, Malik Thomas has got to rein some stuff in, but you don't want to rein him into the point where he's not, he doesn't, you know, there's always like guys like Mason Jones. I mentioned Nick Smith Jr., guys that can really get it done offensively. You do want to put a governor on some of it, but you don't want to overdo that because then they aren't who they are, and now you're trying to change, really fully change what makes them good. So you got to find that balance. It's not always just going to be what Malik Thomas needs to embrace, but how the coaching staff deals with it. And then I'll finish here with Isaiah Seeley. Showed some really good things. Calipari mentioned again, that he's good with the ball, but it's off the ball and not when he's not in control of the ball, where there's some area for growth. He mentioned again that here's a guy that he does things I can't coach. He's comfortable with the ball for sure, putting it on the deck, driving. He looks confident and squares up on his three-point shot. He did not look like a guy that's the odd man out of a top rotation. The problem is, initially when Arkansas started 4-on-4, he was the odd man out. He wasn't in the top 8. We've always described who that top 8 is, and that was one of those things. But because he can shoot, and because he's got that 6'7" size, and because he's got versatility, can help you. And we'll see how comfortable the staff is with him, like they were with Billy Richmond last year, being on the ball. He can even help you at the one because he played a lot of that in high school. So there are a lot of boxes he checks, maybe not defensively yet, but offensively, that could push him into a scenario where he's got a regular role. How many minutes that looks like, I don't know. I'm still not at a place where I can project that. But I don't, going into year one, I would have said maybe more developmental than true role. And now I'm not so sure about that. True role, though, 8 to 10 minutes, something like that. Is it that much? Is it more developmental and you just see him in times of need, attrition, or whatever? I'm still not convinced either way, but I do think he'll play. Just how sporadic is it? What kind of role is consistent there? I think that remains to be seen. But what I saw yesterday was really positive and really good. All right, this is the first time in a while. I've done a lot of hour plus segments in the past. Haven't done as many lately. Been keeping them to 30, 40 minutes. But we went over today because I really wanted to spend a lot of time on the practice stuff and get in the intel that we had on two of the big names on the board in 2026 recruiting. Thank you for joining me one more time. I'm Kevin McPherson. This has been HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We'll be back on tomorrow or later today if something breaks, and I will part ways, giving you a little more info just to wrap it up. Arkansas's coaching staff is already on the road. You got assistant coach Chuck Martin was at the airport. He's heading to the Adidas 3SSB event. Last time out, he was also during the last live eval session in May. He was at Adidas along with associate head coach Kenny Payne. The other associate head coach, Tim Coleman, was with Calipari in Memphis at Nike EYBL, where I was. And I'm told Calipari told us he was off to look at players because he's going to maybe add someone to this current roster and was going to go see this weekend. But he'll also be back at Nike, but not just Nike this time. He'll also attend Adidas. He may make other stops. Remember, there's also the UAA event. And you've also got the Puma Next Pro events. But for now, I know that he plans to attend both Nike and Adidas over the weekend. Again, when he was in Memphis, he stayed in Memphis back in May. So he's going to, and that says a lot to me because he's wanting to put eyes on guys that he didn't see the last time that were on the Adidas circuit, at least that. And we know Arkansas has prioritized several of those players as they are probably more so on Nike, but still some guys with Adidas that matter. At least 3 that I think they're 3 or 4 maybe that they're really drilled in on and have prioritized. All right. Until next time, thanks for being here. Appreciate all of you. See you soon.